What is up, y'all? It is 7 Generations Black. We do not have Shay J on board with us, so we gonna try and rock it out in the best way that we know how. And with my Sam. Welcome to 7 Generations Black, the podcast featuring Theo, EJ Wilson, Lethal, H Soul, and myself, Jice Johnson. Seriously? I asked them to not do that, but they don't listen to me. They don't care, y'all. All right. This weekly podcast is composed of scholars and activists with a fresh perspective and generational lens on the relevant issues of today and the legacy of tomorrow. All right. We are going to jump right into our topic today because we are getting started a little bit late, but I want to go ahead and lay the groundwork for what we're getting ready to talk about. We are seeing protected classes rise up all around us. Asian slurs are federal crimes, and illegal immigrants are worthy of reparations. And while Black symbolism is all around us, we still lack the substance of a protected class. We are instead a neglected class. So I don't know why I want to call you EJ today, but go ahead, Theo. I don't know. Go ahead, Theo, and kick us off.
I think we got to look at the fact that America is just being America with this neglect. And so there's progress that we've made, but that progress is in, should I say, civilizing mob white violence. That's what it's been. It's been civilizing bias. It's been civilizing hatred. You see what I'm saying? So let's look at this. Why did we even fight for representation, which has been reduced to tokenism? It's because of the psychological effects of not being represented in the media we consume. James Baldwin talks about watching cowboys and Indians when he was a little boy, realizing soon after that he was the Indian and not the cowboy, right? And so we fought for representation for the psychological benefit of seeing ourselves represented in American culture, fighting our way out of invisibility, which was part of the fight for first-class citizenship, right? And so what they found out with that was that you can tokenize visibility. You don't have to be substantive if you can just get away with being symbolic, right? So we fought for visibility for the reason of the psychological benefit of seeing ourselves in American culture after all we've contributed to America being America. And so what happens sometimes when you fight white supremacy is that there will be one thing that you fight so hard and you put your whole soul, fight, and might into it. And when you finally get it, it feels like progress. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa is an example where they had to fight tooth and nail just to get South African whites to admit that racism happened. Not change hands economically, not make anybody better who was made worse off by apartheid, just to admit it. And so because we fought so hard for that thing, that representational piece, it felt like progress when we got it. But the fact is, it was only one front. And we exhausted our firepower on the wrong front. And so it feels good to be represented in many ways, but we have to ask ourselves, can that be used against us? Often it is, in terms of tokenization rather than true justice for us.
I like what you're saying, bro. I would go a different, not a different route. It's not a different route, but I would add to that from a perspective of responsibility, personal and collective responsibility, our desire to be wholly integrated into this society was exploited and leveraged against us, right? That desire to be wholly integrated, while some may see it as a strength, obviously the institutions of power that we were up against and are up against were leveraged and used it and see it and saw it as a weakness, and they use it against us. And so we never once in an effective manner, I think, sought to engage in actions that would hold the powers that we allow to be accountable.
So I think I want to jump in real quick. And thank you for giving me a second to get myself situated. But I want to jump right in real quick to just kind of talk about, because even when you say like we wanted to integrate, right? And I think there's a time and a space where it didn't look like there was any other choice but to integrate, because you couldn't necessarily see past the separation. Like we had already been here for 300 years before it was a question, or 250 years before it was even a thought about not being owned as property, right? So I don't know if it's so much about the concept of integration, as it is around agency and leverage. And I feel like that's a space that I keep coming back to, is that Black people don't think about agency and leverage, right? And so I think now there is a space where we want to be accepted, and we want to be, embraced inside the system, because being on the outside of it can be painful when you don't see that perspective and see the history. But I do wonder, how we are. I feel like it comes back to a place where we're very easily appeased, right? Like the concept of tokenism is an appeasement without substance. And so, I think, to the kind of the point of where Theo was going, and I'll provide some context for myself. Lately I've been listening to Dr. Umar, regardless of what anybody thinks about Dr. Umar, because he's controversial in spaces, but he is a very knowledgeable brother. And he's been walking through the years, right, leading up to the death of Dr. King. And I want to encourage people to go and listen to his kind of history walk leading up to the murder of Dr. King, the murder of Malcolm X, the murder of Fred Hampton, and then kind of jumping into the 70s, where he said, you've taken out all of our leaders, and then now you start infusing us with these first Blacks, right? The first Black person to do this, the first Black person to do that. 30 years later, we're still talking about the first Black person to do certain things, right? And so how does that tokenism, affect us in a way where we keep thinking we're getting somewhere, but we're actually not changing the system?
We can call it tokenism, right? And that's really what it is. It's symbolism, it's tokenism, right? It's basically placating to our emotions with imagery, right? With little cornball makeshift propagandized images, marketing, advertisement, right? Which is the subject of this season, right? That's what it is. But there's still always a choice, no matter what. We have choices. People have choices. You can either choose to be a part, or you can choose not to be a part. The problem has been, and always will be, that there is this sense that if I make this choice, and this path is going to be, or this path will be more difficult or harder for me than it already is. And that's something that's not very appealing to a lot of people. The fact that if you make a choice to do something against the grain, against the power structure, the institutions of power, the institutes of power, IOP, you can look that up. It's a real thing, people. Institutions of power, right? If you make a decision that goes against the grain, there's going to be retribution. And there is a lack of wanting to actually suffer, but suffer on our terms. You understand what I'm saying? Suffer on our terms. There's a difference when you have to suffer because someone else is pulling the strings, and then you suffer because you say, you know what? I'm going to make this choice to do this. And whatever comes with that choice that I make, as far as consequences are concerned, I am willing to accept them.
Jump in, H.
Yeah, I hear what Lethal's saying, and I've actually heard what everyone's saying. You know, I'm interested to really see where we're landing on this particular topic. To be honest with you, I think for us today, and if we're looking at a 7 generations lens, I think it's important that we understand that 7 generations isn't 7 generations into the future. It's 3 generations into the future. It's 3 generations into the past. So I want to look into those 3 generations and imagine, you know, coming out of enslavement and coming into the 20s and it's difficult for us to wrap our heads around the fact that there was no cohesive, and to a particular degree, I think this is true today, there's no cohesive vision around Black America or what our Black collective future looks like. I think Wakanda probably, as funny as that may sound, is probably done the best job of articulating of what something like that would even look like, feel like, you know, be like. And so when we talk about this idea of tokenism, it's that America as an institution, as an exercise, has done a much better job at articulating what the benefits would be to join that club, what the benefits would be to exercise and be inside, join the red, white, and blue team. Whereas I don't think that has been articulated as as well by those of us who would envision there being a Black nation, right? So it's kind of hard to say that it's tokenism without contextualizing that human beings have a need to belong to a tribe. We're a tribal people. But at the same time, never in the history of man has there been a group of people that have been collected on the basis of skin color. It's never happened. And so that is just in many senses, that's a figment of the Black nationalist imagination of what they would articulate as, hell, even Wakanda wasn't all Black in the leadership. To be sure, it had CIA swimming right up there at the top of what even Wakanda would be. So I'm careful. I'm circumspect about articulating this idea of tokenism within the absence of a viable alternative. Let me just put it that way.
I gotta say, yeah, you know, you put something very succinctly, brother. What you said is like you used the words collect on the basis of skin color. Collect on the basis of skin color, right? So, you know, we were collected from Yoruba, Hausa, Mende, Igbo, Akan, Ashanti into this collection called Black by other than us. And we also seek to collect us into this thing called Black, whose boundaries was originally defined by those who collectivized themselves as white. Mm-hmm. So we're using a white-made boundary, actually, to try to collect us into that. And of course, as in the words of Ta-Nehisi Coates, oppression turned us into a race, but our resilience turned us into a people. You see what I'm saying? So we made lemonade out of that situation, out of that collection. But advertising do have to do with a compelling vision. It absolutely does. And so the nationalists for the 60s, the brothers and sisters who formed the Black Panthers, had a 10-point program, right? Based on everything that we'd been through in the past, that was the best vision that we could see. Integration had been turned into a pipe dream. They said that the day King was assassinated, Panther membership doubled. You know what I'm saying? Because I was like, well, so much for that we
That's
shall
right.
overcome shit. You feel
That's
me?
right. Yeah.
So, and what you said was very interesting. And I said this in an interview in 2017 that Wakanda coming out would create a vision for Black people that was just so emotionally compelling. It would be like how, you know, folks felt about Avatar and shit. You know what I'm saying? Negroes having Wakanda separation anxiety ain't ever been there. You know what I'm saying? You have now to the point the Eastern African bloc of Somalia, Kenya, and Tanzania are trying to form a power bloc similar to what we saw in Wakanda. They're actually trying to form an economic bloc right now with the transnational hyperspeed rail and all that shit. That's actually they're in discussion with that now, right? Is so Black nationalism has been attacked in this country like a cancer within the body by intelligence agencies, by just bigots and whatnot, right? It's looked at as something that has to be removed. And so, if we want that, we have to understand what comes with that. If you want independence, freedom, nationalism, you don't give a fuck how many Black characters are in the next Marvel movie, do you? If you want Black nationalism, freedom, all that shit, you don't care how many Black representatives are in the Congress, are in, you know, the fucking Rice Krispies commercial. You don't care about that shit. As far as you're concerned, really, the less the better, actually, right? We haven't defined which direction we truly want to go. We're actually stuck in trying to have it both ways.
That's right.
Do you want to be a part of the American vision of integration and make yourself fully a citizen? Do you want that battlefield where you have to accept what comes with that fight? Or do you want to be Wakanda, which is Black nationalism, hyperspace, futurized, right? Afrofuturism. If you want that, you actually have to do some separating.
Yeah.
You actually have to begin to pull yourself.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, I'm not disagreeing. I actually am in agreement, but also like I think that even that concept, you know, and I think there's an evolutionary process to it because when you first start becoming like woke, right, you go through this space of like extreme anger because you're seeing all these atrocities and disparities that you didn't see prior, right? But then as you really think about it, like if you get politics, right, which we know a significant portion of our people do not get politics. But if you get politics, that doesn't even make sense, right? And so, like, while we are people collected, like, you're right. If you were to trace us back, right, as far as you could trace us back, we come from different countries, different tribes, different cultures, right? And we were all gathered because the feature that we share is a skin tone and a region of the earth that we came from that they were able to collect and gather us and move us. But when we're talking about gathering agency and we're talking about and I want to clarify what I'm saying by agency is like the social agency, the ability to direct our own path and chart our own course, so to speak, right? A space that white people already have and can play in. And so while agency isn't always at the individual level, maybe individually you might struggle, as a people, there's nobody holding systemically white people back from creating whatever it is that they want to create. Right now, they want to create on Mars. That's what they're doing, right? Or they're trying to figure that out. I mean, there's nowhere in which people are stopping them as a collective, stopping them from creating whatever, because to that point, like, they're all a collective of different countries as well, right? They don't all come from one country. They come from several countries that they've all collected, and the way that they are classified is by their skin tone, which is how they get all the privileges that they get. But I say that to say, like, when we're looking from a political perspective and we're thinking about agency, like, we live in a global society, so it's never been more closely connected, you know, than any other point in history. So we can't separate totally. It's about how we aggregate our resources and our power in order to make decisions that work on behalf of the collective. And so part of the issue with, the concept of like multiculturalism and integration is we are always at the bottom of that, and we use our resources, our power, our voice, our everything to amass some form of resources or to move resources in a direction that never benefit us as a collective.
Yeah, but I think to Theo's point, you're actually making his point, which is that if you make the choice to nationalize, don't fucking think that you are still going to be invited to be anywhere but in a bottom of a prison cell. I mean, we have Black Panthers who are still in prison now for thinking even in a nationalist frame of mind. So
Right.
you are not going to be able to take on the nationalist frame of mind and still be allowed to play baseball inside of the white American League. So you do have to be very clear. Again, to Theo's point, it's an either or. I mean, some of us are trying to work both and, but only at a certain level. If you start moving up higher and higher and have more people that are that whole, I'm doing this, we're building a Wakanda. We have it in our mind to build a Wakanda. But by the way, can we participate on Wall Street with you? Can we participate in your... No, it's not going to be that. And they've always made that very clear. So I think that we are fooling ourselves if we believe that America would allow us to have a Black mistress while we are seeking
a white husband. Enough said.
Crip that on the running.
Enough said. That's what it is. That's what it is, right? And to wrap it up, you understand what I'm saying? We're talking about we are a neglected class. And why are we a neglected class? We are neglected because we made a choice. And that choice, or those choices that we made, led to us being neglected. We were always neglected. We were always going to be neglected, period. The whole conversation around integration was simply a ruse. It was manipulation 101. It was a shiny object. It was an assessment made on what it was that we told them we desired by our actions. Notice what I said. What we told them, what we desired by our actions. Yes, and I'm saying
I still struggle with that because
just no, wait. I understand you're struggling with it, but if you examine history is not lying. The facts are the facts.
And that's why I have such a challenging conversation around this conversation with reparations. Not because we're not owed it, but because where in history would your enemy give you the financial wherewithal to then become independent and then address and compete with him on it's against white best interests. It's against their best interest. So you can make any fucking argument that you can want to make in front of the UN, and you can have as many marches as you want, and you can make the philosophical argument for it, and I'm behind all of it. It's true. But to get to the idea that this dude is going to cut you a check so now you can compete with him is just as it's a skipping. It's like moving into Disneyland. Like you just skipped such a huge, like, where do they do that at? Where has it ever been done?
And so let me just piggyback on that because I've struggled with that, right? Like, as somebody who, like, it was so weird because I look at the space that integration bought us to even be woke out loud. This is a very interesting conundrum, right? Integration and what we fought for gave us the space to verbally even disagree with the American experiment and not expect a rope around our neck. Do you understand that? So before, you know what I'm saying? For us even had this conversation where white folks be listening was bought actually by the blood shed towards integration. What I always try to do is look at now. What's here now? What is my toolbox? What is in the landscape? I can't change history. I can argue Malcolm versus Martin and all that, but what's here now, right? Where I'm at right now is Minneapolis, right? I'm filming a program for the History Channel. Let me just be honest with you, right? 14 minutes away from me is where George Floyd took his last breath. 14 minutes from where I sit right now. In the meantime, there's a sister who's working on this project who got me involved with the activists at George Floyd Square. I've been there several times, right? And so you have here an experiment in Black independence, right? Today, Minneapolis is voting on whether or not to dismantle their police force. Whoever got that music in the background, please be on mute.
Mute yourself. You got to mute yourself.
You got to mute your shit. Yeah. I don't know who made you think you could play some smooth jazz on this show, but
I didn't know y'all could hear it.
Yeah, of course we can.
You got a good laptop now.
Yeah, right. So what? So the sister who I'm talking to had carved out they carved out square blocks for this shit, right? For an autonomous zone, right? And she's the CEO of the real autonomous zone, right? And I said, how do you sustain it? How do you make this into something that will expand and protect it, right? So the vote is today in Minneapolis on whether or not to have a police force at all, right? Now, if there was a happy medium, I'd say that it was what we were trying to build in Black Wall Street and what other races were allowed to build. That's why you can't compare us. Chinese folks were allowed to build Chinatown, right? Economically autonomous zones whereby you could own and control the land, own and control the politics, the politicians, and have a space whereby you could call the shots, be left the fuck alone, right? They got that in Oakland. That's why the mayor of Oakland, last I checked, was an Asian lady. Maybe things have changed since then, right? That's the happy medium here. But we haven't been loud about it if we want that. We haven't been loud about it. We haven't said, articulating, listen, I'm tired of ghettos. Where Black folks are collected, I need to have thriving communities, which means y'all got to stop doing certain shit, right? The closest they've done it is 14 minutes away from me, right? And so as we have this conversation, the greater Minneapolis area is going to decide whether George Floyd Square is an autonomous zone or simple tokenism and symbolism.
And you know what, Theo? The only reason why, and I disagree with you in this sense.
Okay.
I don't think that the actions of the civil rights movement bought us the opportunity to speak out loud right now.
Really?
What I would say, no, I wouldn't. What I would attribute that to more so is that during that time where our voice was so suppressed was because the American enterprise was headed for collapse. I think it's only because America is so secure now in its complete and total lockdown and fascist state. It's a much more solidified fascist state at this point that it can allow some critique. It can allow to our point. It can allow some tokenism. You could have some Dave Chappelle's. You could have some marches of Black Lives Matter. But guess what? We just went through in the last year and a half the largest wealth transfer in the history of this country. So of course you can have some people yickety yak out, but you got the bank, the loot so much on lockdown that who gives a fuck if there's a independent, little bastard. Like we're not clear as far as how far behind the 8 ball we actually are when it comes to this. Whereas that was not true in the 60s and the 70s. That shit was teetering. That shit was on the verge of collapse. The American enterprise was not only failing at home, it was failing in Vietnam. Asian and brown people had lost faith in it. And so what I'm saying is this, to the point of tokenism. We have to determine and be brutally honest with ourselves, even as Black nationalists. What the fuck are we doing here? As my boys,
You reminded me of a point that I have to make. Go right ahead. Go right ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I'm saying that's the question here.
Before you make your point, Theo, wait a second, because there's something. It's interesting how anti-Blackness can fuck over somebody, right? Because while America and this racist system has gotten so many people to focus in on anti-Blackness, you know who they haven't been as focused in on? Asians. That's why you have China now taking over Africa, and why they want to be. What's happening with the Asian community is almost quietly they've been creeping on up to the point where they've amassed a massive amount of wealth. I mean, Alibaba can rival Amazon, right? You can see that they have been amassing, quite a bit of control over what's happening on a global level, to the point where anti-Blackness has caused America to be so hyper-focused in on making sure Black folks don't come up, that they have been allowed to build Chinatowns, and they have been allowed to build all these other types of infrastructure all over the world, because people have been focused on making sure Black folks don't build. And now what you have is you have a rivaling second world power that is very close to American power. It's very interesting that you would say that. Go ahead and make your point. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, yeah.
That's because Asian people hate niggas too. So I mean,
that's why I said it's anti-Blackness.
Of course, the elder said the African has no friends.
Has no friends.
And all right, and of course.
And I know where you're going to go with that, Theo. I do. And I'm not saying all Asian people. I'm not saying, but we're talking about the forces, right? The forces that be. Because I'm all about solidarity amongst people liberating themselves out of all of those spaces. So I don't mean to overgeneralize when I say Asian people hate niggas too. What I'm saying is China ain't looking out for African people.
No, it's not. And let me just say something. So in the revolutionary struggle, when brothers and sisters got locked up, still locked up, assassinated, what we don't look at the killing of our leaders as what it was, which is branding. They branded that path. That path is branded with our blood. It's branded with danger. It's branded with a short lifespan. It's branded with deadly outcomes. You see what I'm saying? It's branded with martyrdom, and then niggas still cripping. You feel me? Like it's something that is symptomatic of the cage that we're in. And so 7 generationally, the path to freedom becomes clear. If first of all, the first step is aggregation. I don't know if it can be aggregated here, and I don't know if it can be. And that's just one of those things that, a lot of the FBA, ADOS people are like, no, we fought and died. I look to see if wokeness can lead to something else besides resentment and self-righteousness. Because that's what people be stuck at with all the correct facts. It's not an argument to me whether or not we're owed reparations.
That's right.
Based on every other reparations payment paid out.
Yeah.
We're owed that times 10.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like, it's not whether or not it's owed. It's what you're going to do with the life you have and the landscape you live it on. And I said America's good for one thing, getting your butter up. It's good for one thing, getting your paper, getting some money. Every immigrant, and I've been talking to Black immigrants left and right, some from Somalia, some from the Dominican Republic, and they're all telling me one thing. America is good for getting your paper up. And I got to believe them. They're from other places, right? But at that same time, what we are looking at right now is a landless people. We were, one smart thing Dr. Umar did say was we're the only people you can't send back to their country. You can even send Native Americans back to the reservation, and so the only place for us is prison. And so what's that landscape look like 7 generations from now? What are the trends? And that's what we have to look at. And in terms of the not protected class, we are to a certain extent. Ask any elder who truly remembers the days when niggas was unpro fucking protected. You know what I'm saying? The fact that somebody can lose their position on ABC if they get caught uttering the word nigger is a type of protection, because we know that nigger is the first shot in a continuum of violence that leads to actual death, right? There's repercussions. I say reparations. There's repercussions for being publicly anti-black, right? There are. And you can't act like, we've seen so many people lose their positions, even football coaches who tried to acknowledge some facts about black DNA still lost their motherfucking jobs. You know what I'm saying?
Theo, there's a difference between institutionalizing that, right?
And culture, and
it
there's
being
like
in the realm of the culture, right? I don't care about the realm of the culture. What I care about is it being institutionalized and standardized and professionalized. You understand what I'm saying?
But wouldn't you say
that is the job of the elected officials that we put in power to develop, produce, and put out those policies. You understand what I'm saying? For example, you missed Jice's earlier point when she spoke to how that it is actually punitively illegal. You understand what I'm saying? To use what are termed as Asian hate slurs or Asian hate language. You understand what I'm saying? We sit here on YouTube and say nigga all the time with no retribution, no punishment. You understand what I'm saying? From an established policy, from an established document that says you can't do that. That is illegal. That is wrong. You will now be dealt with accordingly.
Would you like black people to not be able to use the word nigga? Like, would you?
That's not my point. That's not my point. That's not my point. My point is right, that there is a difference between what is culturally unacceptable and what is institutionally unacceptable. Those are two different things.
Yeah, but maybe it's institutionally unacceptable because we haven't subscribed to it, whereas Asians.
It is not institutionally unacceptable to say the N-word. You can turn on BET or any other station and hear the N-word, but you will not. Hold on. No, it ain't always us. But you will not hear an Asian hate language or slur.
I agree. I think we're saying the same thing, but I'm asking the question though: is the reason why it's not institutional, is that because of us and our insistence on using it, whereas Asians aren't saying, listen, you can't use slanty eye, but we gonna use slanty eye when we want to use slanty eye because, yo, what's up, my slanty eye? So maybe what I'm asking, you understand what I'm saying?
What I'm saying to that is this, right? I don't know if that is the reason, the cause, or part of it, whatever the case may be. But I will say but no. It can't be that simple. It can't be that simple, right? I will say though that we do and we have played a role in it, and it ain't because we want to continue to use this language or use these words. It's because of other things that we do in other realms of existence and aspects of life, like politically. What the fuck do? We continue to politically support organizations and institutions and whatnot that tell us straight up in our face, we ain't doing shit for y'all. We are not here for y'all. We here for everybody. And we say, oh, okay, you're here for everybody. And I didn't say no party. I didn't say no party.
That's what they do, and that's why I left. I'm just owning that part.
I understand. But what I'm saying is we continue to allow. You understand what I'm saying? I'm just using that as an example of one aspect, one area.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying? Of how our actions, right, participate, contribute, and also we can account, right, for what's happening, what's going on with us. You understand what I'm saying? A lot of times, man, we do this, right? We do this, but you got 3 fucking fingers pointing back at you. And in my book, when you got 1 finger pointing the opposite direction and 3 pointing back at you, that means your ass is 75% responsible.
Yeah, I would agree with that. When you have been abused with anti-blackness for 400 years, after a while, you participate in it. It was, when I was a little kid, I could draw pictures perfectly of everyone in my class. When I drew me, I was always looking like Elvis. This is a true thing. I had to uproot that shit. That's a thing. Like, see what I'm saying?
But at some point in time in your life, though, at some point in time in your life, in your individual life, right? You made a choice. You came to a decision. And what I'm talking about is there is a enough of a majority of us who do not come to conclusions or make decisions or make choices and whatnot that are actually in the best interest of themselves or the collectiveness of our existence.
And I think that speaks directly to the 7 generation lens. And I think this is a topic that we have not addressed clearly enough, and I want to state it here succinctly for the record. I think it is a mistake for us to completely or wholeheartedly circumscribe our tribe as merely people who share the same skin complexion. I think that we have to look at tribes as first as families, like the mob thinks of themselves. They don't say all Italians are going to make it. What they say is La Costa Nostra is going to make, we going to make it. We don't know about the rest of y'all Italians. Y'all can go and believe in all that apple pie and fight wars for these white folks if y'all want to. But as for me and my family, then we subscribe, and you have a collection of families that are subscribed to a 7 generation lens. And I say that to say this, that if we continue just to think of and assess how Black people are doing, we will constantly be looking at a zero-sum game, things as half full, because Black people, those that have identified and continue to identify as such, are by and large nigger-minded.
I mean, look,
I'm gonna turn it over. They're nigger-minded.
I feel like this is a mindset moment.
There are people who are married on by the plantation, for the plantation. They want the plantation. They love Leonardo DiCaprio more than they love themselves. And so what I'm saying is, I don't want to be associated or have to include people like that in my tribe who I am looking to survive, because we're on a survival basis here. So just saying, yo, everybody who shares this skin color, y'all can roll with. Even Harriet Tubman didn't do that shit. Name me one Black leader that did that shit just because of merely you got skin color.
Marcus Garvey? What you talking about?
Yeah, but even with Marcus Garvey, you had to be a part of
the UNIA. Yeah,
the UNIA. You had to subscribe to self-development. You had to subscribe to one God, one nation, you had to
God, one aim, and
subscribe
destiny.
to that. So what I'm saying is, I love Black people. I hate niggas.
Oh,
and what I mean by that, I don't think I have to get any more clear. I am willing to organize, and I'm willing to die for Black people. I am not willing to organize or die for niggas. I'm not. And so when we start thinking of 7 generations, let us be very particular about who we are going to organize ourselves with and who we are talking about. Every brother is not a brother. I can't be more clear about that.
I think you're right, brother. Let me just drop into my mindset moment right quick, because brotherhood is more determined by quality of spirit and your aim than it is by skin color. We know that all skin folk ain't kinfolk. We already know that, right? And so what we have to understand is the reason why Black keeps coming up is because the oppression of Africa was a pan-European effort. We were all quarantined as Black, from Ethiopia to Sudan to Nigeria to South Africa and back, right? So pan-European oppression is still happening. It's going to, and it's happening ultimately because of global anti-Blackness. There's beginning of a pan-Asian anti-Blackness colonizing Africa, right? And so we're going to have to deal with that. The question is, who do you lift first? And I think you're correct in saying who you lift first is those who have similar ideals and aims as you. That's the thing that's going to determine brother and sisterhood.
That's right.
Starting inside your house is the best thing.
That's right.
I start with my family, and I start with my community. But you're absolutely right. And when we're going to have to buttress up against the fact that we've been quarantined globally by skin color some point in time.
Yep.
Some point in time. That is the fact. The elders have long since, and life and history just shows that, right?
Yeah.
But where do we begin? We begin with similar mindset, aims, and proof of where their actual energy is dedicated to.
Facts.
Yeah.
Facts.
You want to jump in there, Lethal, with your mindset moment, or you want me to go?
Nah, I mean, if you want me to close it down and shut it down, I can do that. But let me go ahead and get this out of the way. So we're talking about neglect and the neglected class, right? So class is in session.
All right. Let's go, dog.
Let me put my shit on mute.
Yeah, the tree you neglect today will grow to produce the branch from which you will be hung from tomorrow. What are we talking about here? We're talking about willful blindness. We're talking about cognitive dissonance, right? We're talking about people choosing to avoid liability by intentionally, right, keeping themselves in a state of unawareness, right? We always talk about how, when you don't know, and that we're woke or they're woke or some are woke, and it's a process and so forth and so on. Well, it's also a process to stay ignorant. You understand what I'm saying? It's a choice, right, to not learn. It's a choice to not educate yourself. It's a choice being made, right? The reason why is irrelevant at this point in time. Okay, we cannot say on the left hand that we are in a war and on survival mode for our very existence, but then on the right hand, okay, accept the continuation or the continuance or the state of ignorance in which some people are choosing to live in. We can't have it both ways, right? So just remember, okay, just remember the tree that you choose to neglect today will grow to be the tree that produces the branch which you hung from tomorrow. Word.
Well, my mindset moment is, listen, every society has niggas in the way that we see niggas, right? They all do. And what I think is that our Blackness is what creates obstacles for us systemically. And that when we organize, that we really have to organize for the liberation of Blackness and demand agency. Because once we have that, the niggas will separate themselves. Really, that's where you start getting into the class system, right? In a way that we don't get into the class system yet because of the obstacles created by our Blackness. And so I wholeheartedly hear what you're saying, H, and I'm in agreement that we got to watch who we're watching out for. But even when we aggregate together with those of us that are of like minds, our Blackness still creates obstacles. And so once we get enough of us aggregated in order to liberate us out of that, the niggas will start separating themselves. They're going to be niggas everywhere we go, because it's going to be people who are ignorant, lazy, uneducated, violent, that are going to be in every society. And we can't look at ourselves as being any different from that, right? Because that's a people problem. But we still have to overcome the systemic issues that come from the fact that when you see us, you see Blackness first.
Yeah, facts. We might be at that number already.
Hey.
I'm just saying, I think we should be open to that idea that we might be at that number already. We might be at that number already.
Let me ask a question for clarification.
Mm-hmm.
when we say niggas, who exactly are we talking about?
Okay.
Well, I just said the uneducated, the the lazy, the all of them, the ridiculousness
I
of
think
folks.
you just defined it. Actually, Lethal. I think in your definition, you just defined it as those that are choosing, right, who are making a choice either unconsciously or consciously. But you're very right when you say this. Unconsciously is a choice. Consciously is a choice. Those are both choices, regardless of whether you know it or not. To involve and engage inside of a system of their own destruction and are willing to take themselves, their children, and everyone else around them with them in that buying into falsehood. I think that's the working definition that I would use, is the one that you would use as well, as far as that choice making around whether you're going to remain ignorant, that choice making around whether you're going to tap dance inside with your children's future in order for a few, I think that would be my definition. And it wouldn't be necessarily rooted in color, to Jice's point, because I think niggerism spans the breadth and width of humanity. However, I think what Black people do sometimes is we try to include our niggas with us in that number of liberation, whereas other people are like, listen, no, those are crackers. We are white people, and thus is the difference as far as how we gonna divvy this shit up.
Yep.
All right, y'all. Stay tuned in. We got a couple more Tuesdays left this year. You were listening to 7 Generations Black. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that like button. And remember, peace and love, family. Until next time, hustle hard for your 7 generations.